Fintech Chatter Podcast, brought to you by Tier 1 People, the leaders in executive search for Fintech ventures.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the podcast where I connect with fintech leaders to chat about their secrets to success. I'm Dexter Cousins, your host and the founder of Tier 1 People, the executive search firm dedicated to finding exceptional leaders for high-growth fintech ventures. Tier 1 People is the trusted partner to some of the world's most recognizable fintech brands. You can find out more at tier1people.com. Now, on to today's show. Danny, welcome to your Fintech Chatter debut.
Hey Dexter, thanks for having me on the show. Really excited to be here. Was delighted when you got in touch and invited me on.
Well, I've invited you on for purely selfish reasons. I always get my yearly predictions wrong, and I thought this year I'm not going to do it. I'm going to bring along the experts who've invested a lot of money and time and research to really look at the trends of 2025 in fintech. So we're going to cover the report in just a little while, but I thought before we did that, maybe it would be a good idea for you to share with our listeners a bit about Money2020 for, the few that might not know who you are.
Sure, yeah. Well, so Money2020 has been around now for over a decade and was launched initially in the US, in Las Vegas, and the show still continues to run there. And really why it came about was that two industry insiders, they had a problem. They wanted to go to an event where, the whole ecosystem came together, banks, payments, fintechs, startups, VCs, but nothing like that existed. And I think if you look across some of the best events or shows globally, they're not actually normally started by event professionals. They're normally started by people that are working within the industry, really passionate for the industry, and then they spot a problem. They think, maybe we could do something better here. And that's really kind of how Money2020 came about. So they launched the show, fairly modest launch in the beginnings, but the whole industry came together, and then it's really had very strong organic growth since then. We now have a European edition, so it was in Copenhagen originally, but now it takes place in Amsterdam each year. We have an Asia edition, which is what I do. I run the Asia edition of the show. So we were in Singapore in 2018 and 2019. Global health pandemic happened. We were forced to go away and rethink a few things. And when we came back, we relaunched the show in Bangkok. And the reason we did that was that some of the magic of the show, and there's a lot of magic at Money2020, which we can get into, is that it's a destination location. So we get people away from the financial hub. So, it's not in New York, it's in Las Vegas, it's not in London, it's in Amsterdam. Similar in Asia, Singapore, amazing location, serious fintech hub. But it's a financial center, and there's always that pull to go back to the office or do other business in and around the event. Whereas when you're in Bangkok or a destination location, you've got a really captive audience for those 3 days of the event. And that just adds to the on-site experience for sponsors, for delegates. And it's a premium show. It's a ticketed show. So again, when people are buying tickets, what do they want to get out of the show? Well, it's amazing content, but also the networking. And people are serious about doing business at the event when they fly into a destination location. And then the newest addition to our lineup is coming this year. It's in the Middle East. So brilliant. We've got an event happening in Saudi Arabia later in the year in September. So we're really a global event brand now. And I think that is also part of the uniqueness and the power of Money2020 is that we're a truly global brand. And, we've got our eyes kind of set in the future as well, looking at maybe new markets, exciting markets as we move forward. So I would describe Money2020 as a festival more than a...
I was going to say it's kind of like the Ministry of Sound of fintech, right?
That's it. Yeah. We want people to feel like rock stars, right? When they're at the show, we want them to feel really good and really happy about what they're doing, where they are. We want people to do a lot of business. So we say, you can get 12 months of business done in a few days. We power everything at the show through our meeting apps. We've launched new meeting programs in the US last year, so more kind of speed dating type format. So you can get hundreds of meetings done, in those few days. But we want people to feel good. We want them to have a good time. And you don't have to do a meeting sitting in a formal area, right? You could be doing a meeting in a party in the evening, a networking evening, or you could be doing a meeting sitting outside, enjoying a lovely view from our kind of Money Beach Club that we have in Amsterdam. Yeah. So, you think about the formal and informal, and if people are having a good time, they're much more likely to have great meetings as well. So I think that's what makes it special.
The social element is I think one thing, and it's been interesting to see, kind of and when you talk about the locations, I'm thinking this sounds like the Hangover movies.
Get out alive.
And so, Money 2020, I guess, is kind of legendary from that respect. But we've seen a little bit of I think a kind of momentum shift in people focusing on wellness, health, particularly over the last couple of years, where it's become very, very tough for founders in the fintech world. What have you kind of seen from the attendees, and have you kind of changed the format any?
I think the kind of structure of the show is always across kind of 3 action-packed busy days. But I think if you're there and you're conscious about preserving your energy, because it is a long 3 days, right? You're walking around huge halls and you're having lots of different meetings. If you're not smart about it and you're not 23, you can really be kind of out on your, to use my English word, out on your ass, if you're not too careful. So I think you've got to, like anything, right, manage your own energy levels. But we provide healthy food options. There's non-alcoholic drink options at the industry nights. We've got wellness programs that we've introduced to the shows now. So really thinking about health and fitness and how almost how you can arrive and maybe even leave the event feeling better than when you arrived, right? That is possible.
Yeah.
And in Bangkok this year, we've introduced a Harmony Hub, we're calling it. So it's an area where you can go in and you can get healthy juices, you can relax, there's meditation pods, and, you can get a massage as well. Wow. So, get a nice neck massage, get a shoulder massage. So really an area, because it is a lot of hustle and bustle on the show floor.
Yeah.
But this is a quiet space where you can go and relax and recharge, and then come back refreshed at the same time. So ultimately it's down to you, right? We can't make the decision, but we're providing an environment where, hopefully we're making it a bit easier to stay energized and put your best foot forward.
I think obviously you got so much choice when it comes to events, and how I make the distinction of the ones that I'll make sure are in the calendar is not only the quality of people who are there attending the event, but also the quality of speakers.
Exactly,
Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your approach to speakers and the caliber of kind of speakers that you generally get along to the events?
I think the one thing that sets us apart internally is that our kind of product, our content, our editorial teams, they sit completely separate to our commercial teams. Because what often happens at most other events is that if company comes waving a big check, they're able
like the awards, right? Like pay for this award, Table of 10 and you've won the...
That's it, yeah. Danny Levy, you've been nominated as the most inspiring leader in Asia.
Yeah, mate.
Send us $20,000.
I'm always tempted to kind of do one of those magazines, right? It always reminds me of that scene in The Office with David Brent where he's on the cover of the magazine and he's had it for 5 years.
I'm sure if you give it a year or so, AI will be able to do that for you anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, again, going back to what I said before about, because it's a ticketed show, that delegate experience is so important to us. And if you know as well as I do, if you're at an event where the majority of speakers are paid for, when you're sitting on the stages, you get a distinct feeling that you're being sold to.
Yeah.
Or
they've just listened to one of our podcast episodes and regurgitated everything that we've done with our guests.
Exactly. And, that doesn't mean sometimes a great experience for you, right? Because you're not getting the best in class content. So we separate the two for that reason. So our editorial integrity is really important to us. We, from year to year, a lot of other events may recycle speakers. So you'll see the same faces the same times, talking about the same topics. We never do that. So we don't recycle speakers year on year. And we do what's called a call for content. So instead of us going out and deciding who we want to invite to come, what we do is we do the research and we talk to the industry, but then we settle on an overall theme for the show. And then we have our kind of sub-content pillars that would feed into that. And that then kind of forms our call for content. And we get thousands of applications to come and speak at Money2020. As I said, the power of the brand, the stages hold a lot of weight. And I think because of that integrity, people really think that they can use it to make announcements and talk about things for the first time. So it's very hard to get selected. So probably less than, I would say, 2% would get picked to actually speak on the stage. But then the editorial team, who also come from fintech, I think that's another differentiator, is that we're not getting people that don't know the industry. We have people that live and breathe the industry every single day. I am sitting with commercial sometimes, so I'm not from fintech, but these people, they get up in the morning and, that's what gets them out of bed in the morning. They love what they do. So they then go through these applications, and then they decide with their colleagues, who should make the cut. And I would say gender diversity, but also diversity of thought is really important to us as well. So again, when we're structuring panels, we want to have it balanced. We want to have maybe people that don't agree with each other. So it's not one of those panels where everyone's just nodding their heads and, kind of going through the motions. And I would just lastly say the format. So it's not easy to do interactivity, facilitated kind of conversation when events get to a certain size. But again, we've taken great strides to introduce ways in which we can have presentations, panels, but then interactive opportunities in roundtables and workshops so you can go deeper. Because again, people are always at a different stage of their journey, right? They might just be starting out and really need the beginner's type information, but others have been doing it for decades and they're really looking to go deep. And that's where workshops and roundtables can be valuable. And, maybe like me, not as extroverted, that can also be a great way to kickstart conversations with people who are like-minded to you, or maybe have some of the same challenges you do in a facilitated format. So, I would say that's really, and we live and breathe it. It's, we're a well-oiled machine, and, we have a great format for putting on amazing content.
Now I want to kind of move on to the research and report of trends for 2025. And you said something before about Money2020 often being a launch pad for announcements. This is on video, so you're going to be reading a lot from notes because the report is that new. You haven't really even had a chance to read it yet. So I'm kind of honored to have this almost exclusive opportunity to go through it with you.
I think this is the first time we've spoken about it, actually. Outside of to colleagues, so it's exciting to talk about what we've been doing.
Awesome. So look, I guess first burning question that I've got is what is the thing that stood out to you most about the report?
So if I just take a step back, I guess, so what we've done is we put together a white paper, which it's really a deep dive into the kind of changing fintech scene in Asia Pacific. And I mentioned that research that we do, to get our content pillars in place for the call for content. So we've spoken to about 50 key players from across the region, and these are banks, they're fintech companies, regulators, and then the report covers trends and challenges and opportunities in areas like cross-border payments, digital lending, insurtech, regtech. So we've got a really good cross-section of the industry. And the goal really was to create a roadmap for driving innovation, kind of improving financial inclusion, and building a customer-focused, sustainable financial ecosystem in Asia. It's a combination of kind of qualitative and quantitative methods. So when you go through the report, you'll see the written kind of analysis, but also good data points. So, you can take that, which is always good. And I guess there's a few key trends that we're seeing from the report. I think the first thing is that the banking scene in Asia Pacific is clearly changing really fast. So we're seeing that both digital and traditional banks, they're very focused on better customer experiences by using new technology and tailoring services to local needs. And we're seeing that digital banks are growing quickly with the help of partnerships and ecosystems, but profitability is still a major hurdle. So only 5% of them are profitable worldwide. Traditional banks, clearly they're upgrading, so they're using technologies like AI, blockchain, cloud technology to modernize, improve efficiency, and reach more customers. And I would say the interesting thing is the line between the digital and the traditional banks is really blurring now, both in terms of the technology, but also the strategies that they're using to tackle regulations and meet new customer expectations. So we are seeing, the two worlds kind of coming closer together within the kind of more traditional incumbents and the digital banks. I think the second thing we're seeing in Asia Pacific is that digital payments and cross-border innovation is really standing out. So the report really demonstrated, this will be no great surprise, but Asia Pacific is really driving digital payments with systems like Pay Now, Prompt Pay, and UPI. So very advanced payment systems. It's really just one click. You can do cross-border payments now from your bank, DBS into Thailand or into India. So, really leading the way in that sense. I think we saw in 2024, non-cash payments in the region grew about 20% year on year. So that outpaces Europe, it outpaces North America. There's this innovations reshaping cross-border payments. So initiatives like Project Nexus, linking instant payment systems. We're seeing blockchain making waves, which is highlighted with partnerships like Thailand's SCB, with Lightnet and Singapore's Project Ubin Phase 5. And there's a lot clearer regulation in Southeast Asia with these breakthroughs. And I would say as well, at the same time, the kind of cryptocurrency and the central bank digital currencies are opening doors to new global payment solutions as well. So a lot going on.
There is a lot going on, isn't there?
As you can imagine.
Yeah.
And more as well, but we could pause there if you wanted to.
Oh, look, I think, you mentioned cross-border currencies, and, what's really fascinated me is to find out that Australia is like number 5 in the world when it comes to outbound remittance volumes, right? And it's kind of these, opportunities that you would never think of, right? And I think I put in like 5 pitches last year to cross-border currency firms looking to launch in Oz, and I was thinking, hey, what's going on? Why are they looking here, right? And lo and behold, because there's actually a lot of business here.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that the thing with it as well, I think for the consumer now, in terms of payments, it's getting to that point, isn't it, where you take it for granted. You don't think about it so much anymore. And it's like the embedded kind of payments and embedded finance, it's very integrated now, isn't it? It's becoming one click, especially in Asia with the things like the super apps, that we have that are very prevalent. That opens up other things, right, in terms of fraud and the risks on that side. Scammers have really grown in Singapore and Southeast Asia. But there's some amazing things. And also just that cross-border collaboration that I mentioned, right, between countries in this area, and really open regulations. And one thing we're seeing at the show in Asia as well is we have many regional regulators that will come together. Yeah. But that kind of spirit of collaboration and how they can work together, it's really great to see.
Yeah, look, I think that's one thing that has really struck me is, if I was going to look at the kind of core difference between, say, a region like Singapore and a region like Australia, is that the openness of the regulators, and even my experience of having them ask me my opinion, like, hey, I'm just a recruitment guy, right? Like, oh yeah, but we're interested in what you're seeing that are happening in talent, right? Like, we know that we're entering uncharted waters, and that where we're going to find people with the expertise, and the kind of critical thinking to develop these new regulations. And this is coming from top people in Australia, right? Kind of nobody's interested, right? Like, you offer your help, and like, whatever, we'll come back to you. And I think that spirit of collaboration, not just in Singapore but across Southeast Asia, is creating it. When you look at the opportunity, we keep talking about the US as a huge opportunity. 650 million people in Southeast Asia, 2 billion in China. There'll be 2 billion in Africa pretty soon. Kind of this is the epicenter of the new world, right? They kind of So you look at the demographics of not only those population, the size of those populations, but the average age of those populations is almost half of what it is in Western populations.
And they think so differently as well, don't they? They're kind of mobile first.
Yeah.
And also in these places, there just isn't the same kind of legacy infrastructure issues. So although maybe they're starting at it from coming from further behind, there's more opportunities to leap forward much quicker.
Yeah.
In terms of some of these different technologies. And I think that's what's really exciting, right? About when you look at the kind of the digital transformation, but also that opportunity within finance for fintech. So, that's certainly what we're seeing in kind of Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific as well.
And it's interesting you talk about the infrastructure piece and not having that legacy. I mean, this is something that's been talked about for, the last 10, 15 years from people within my network, where they've talked about the opportunity. And I think now we're at the point where the technology now allows you to execute at scale very quickly.
It does,
and it's almost like the kind of, good old hockey stick, kind of, we're at that point where we're going to see very rapid innovation and change, and people are going to just be shocked as to, hey, well, how did this happen so quickly? And it's not. It's like the 10-year overnight success, right? I think we're very much, feels like we're at that kind of point in time, Danny.
I think so, yeah. I think that's where you've got to, though, give the opportunity, because, like you said, it's those kind of entrepreneurial, those medium-sized businesses that can spring up and they can use technology and these new AI workflows to their advantage. But you've also got to get those SMEs funding.
Yeah.
And in developing markets like Indonesia or Philippines, access to funds is so important. And I think that's where embedded finance, is really making waves. And we see brands like Gcash and Big Pay, they're helping to do loans, and they make banking more accessible in these markets where maybe in access to a traditional bank, as we would think about it, it's not so realistic when you've got a country the size of Indonesia. So, they're making access to funding, and we often forget, right, the SMEs, they make up so much of the economy, right, and the market in most countries. They really drive it forward. So if you can foster that innovation, that access to funds, you're going to boost, your economy.
Yeah.
So I think that we're seeing that in Asia as well, which is really exciting, because again, that gets missed in a lot of more developed countries sometimes.
Yeah. And I think we often forget that fintech in itself is an ecosystem whereby, kind of either all ships rise with the tide or we all sink with the tide, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen that particularly in this last 2 years where funding has dried up. And, we've seen, neobanks that were providing banking as a service platforms run out of capital, go bust. And then the businesses that, were on that banking as a service platform, they end up going bust, trying to fight for their lives for 12 months, but not able to find another solution. So I think it's a really kind of fine balance, right, of how do you, somebody's decision somewhere has that kind of butterfly effect of all these other things that happen. But interesting to hear you talk about the, bit about growth. And one of the things that I've noticed is that we're starting to see businesses take a completely different approach to growth. Whereas previously it was raise capital, hire a lot of people, and scale the business. It's been, let's not raise capital, let's bootstrap, let's use technology and AI as much as we can and be constrained. But I think what the byproduct of that means that when you have limited capital, particularly in fintech, which is a capital intensive business, particularly from a regulatory perspective, a lot of the kind of innovations that we've seen here in Oz, I think have been restricted by that. And so it's kind of been the low-hanging fruit stuff that, we got excited about in 2015, and it hasn't kind of had the opportunity to evolve from that because of the lack of funding. What are some of the kind of big, bold innovations or ideas that you're seeing come from the report and the trends, and just what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, well, I guess just before we go on to kind of the big technology trends or the exciting areas, I would say that the other thing to remember in Asia is that cash is still actually the predominant method of payments in most markets, right? It is still quite a traditional culture, and overcoming barriers to financial inclusion still remains really front of mind. for most people and most companies, right? Because again, Asia faces really big hurdles, low digital literacy, poor infrastructure. As I said, they were able to bypass some of those legacy infrastructure issues, but that doesn't mean that, it's all smooth sailing. There are poor infrastructure issues. There's regulatory hurdles, unsustainable business models. So we saw in the report, which was, I just wanted to raise, which was nearly 20% of respondents are focusing on expanding into new markets, but 19% are focused on driving product innovation, while 15% and 12% are prioritizing partnerships and regulatory compliance. And that was really linked to, the efforts to make financial services more accessible and inclusive across the region. So I would say that that still comes out a lot when you talk to people, that is front of mind. And it's actually, how can you lift people up? Right. Because there's a huge underserved population. And if they're getting lifted up, again, that's going to make the opportunity bigger, the piece of the pie bigger.
Yeah, so I guess you rather than going for a TAM, it's almost like creating your TAM, and
that's it.
Yeah, market making rather than just serving the same customers with another product.
Exactly. Yeah,
Awesome.
I think to answer your question, you asked me kind of around what else we're seeing. So, I mean, we haven't talked about the big one, which normally comes up straight away, right? Which is AI.
Yeah.
I mean, we're clearly seeing aggressive adoption of AI technologies for fraud detection, customer personalization, and operational efficiency. So that came out strongly. Increased adoption of open banking with market-driven models in Southeast Asia. Clearly regulatory initiatives in Singapore. Digital lending has come out, so the kind of enhanced credit assessments using alternative data sources. Again, that's expanding financial inclusion. And lastly is really around sustainability. So there's a growing focus on financial inclusion and addressing entrenched societal challenges. So there's some of the kind of big things that are coming out of the report, really.
But to kind of double click on the AI piece as well, I don't know if this comes across in the report, but certainly what I'm kind of taking from my network and when I'm talking with execs is I think they've got comfortable with AI and the hype piece, that, they've recognized where the immediate kind of gains are to be had. I think it kind of touches on the things that you said: fraud prevention, efficiencies, improving customer experience through automation, bots, those things. The That's generative AI of, we're going to create a financial advisor who's going to, look after all of your finances. I think that's seen as, okay, it's kind of opening a bit of a Pandora's box.
It's a bit similar to when the kind of robo-advisory came along, right? You thought you're going to be dealing with this, iRobot type person that was going to be giving you investment tips, but it's not really like that, right? It's helping you automate and not think about it and do things savvily, but it's not quite at that level. But I think at the moment, obviously AI has moved so quickly, but we're really seeing it mainly being used, as I say, for kind of the kind of customer service, the sales, and clearly maybe moving soon to a point where it does become that thing where if you're calling into a bank, for example, at the moment, you're often talking to a kind of a human rep, right? And you'd be going through, this is my issue and this is what I'm facing. And, they say, okay. And then, you hang up the phone. And then if it hasn't been resolved, the next day you've got to call back again, haven't you? Maybe you're probably going to speak to someone different. And you've got to re-explain all over again what the issue was. And so obviously AI would, if you're talking to a kind of an AI, they will register, they will remember that conversation. You'll call back the next day. You won't have that kind of friction that you're having to repeat yourself all over again. And you won't even know probably that you're interacting with an AI agent, in some of these. And clearly that has cost-saving benefits and, it's good for some of these larger institutions. So I think we're kind of seeing it moving towards that direction, rather like you said, than kind of taking over all the kind of internal operations in some of these places. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Now I've got a big burning question that I want to ask you is, obviously you're very, very close to all of the, what's happening in fintech. You've got the kind of insights from the report as well. If I was to go, here's a check for 50 million, go and find the next big opportunity in fintech. Based on everything that you've seen, where do you think you would go and kind of look to build a fintech.
Yeah, the thing as well is, right, when you say fintech, the challenging part is there's so many different opportunities within
right?
that.
So you've got carte blanche, right? Like you can be anything that sits within that whole, right? Whether it be reg tech, crypto, insurtech, digital banks, cyber, AI, right? It's kind of, I think that's one of the beauties, right? Is there's so many problems to solve.
Yeah. And how much capital are you going to get? So like you say, you
50 mil,
bootstrapped,
give you 50 mil.
50 mil. Okay. Probably run out of that in 6
months. US, right? Yeah.
First and foremost, I'd spend 49 million on Money2020. That'd be my big bet. I wouldn't even have an idea or a business case. I'd just go. But no, seriously, I think there's a few areas. I mean, if I was in Asia, based on the report, I think, like I mentioned, I think embedded finance, I mean, it clearly offers significant opportunities, right? I mean, the integration of financial services into everyday business and consumer experiences, I think that's already here, but, we see that still has a way to go. And we've touched on the young demographics and the underbanked and the financial inclusion. So I think that's an exciting space. I think targeting kind of industry-specific financial solutions, digital wallets for ride-hailing, e-commerce, these still present high growth potential because they focus on accessibility and convenience. And I would say, the last one, I'm cheating a bit here, but the last one, we've already talked about it. I mean, clearly there's a huge focus on AI right now. You're seeing most fintechs, some fintechs rebrand so AI is in the name, but I think an AI-powered fintech startup, it can make banking smarter, faster, more personal. You're probably going to get maybe access to funds in this space a little bit easier at the moment because VCs and capital is flowing into this area. And I think with AI in the mix, a startup probably can quickly scale. It can automate the boring stuff. It can stay ahead by delivering, cool real-time solutions that customers actually want. There you go.
Maybe the pitch deck needs to read at the intersection of fintech, AI, and crypto.
That's it.
There you go. That's the 50 million check. Right?
Yeah. Plus B2B SaaS.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned there the ride-hailing kind of connection. One of the things that really struck me, I was in Bali last year with the kids, and it was the first time I'd been there in about 10 years. And I've got to say that the biggest difference that I noticed was Grab and ride sharing and how it had completely changed, not just my experience, but the lifestyle there and the opportunities for people to create their own businesses. It was mind-blowing, I think, how much it had changed. And one of the things that I think is really kind of incredible about the whole financial inclusion piece that you've talked about is the kind of intersection of a ride-sharing app like Grab, right? And how that is almost like having a business in your hand and like livelihood and freedom, right? To kind of in your hand. And it's something that we kind of really take for granted here in Oz, right? Because everybody kind of grows up in a fairly comfortable life. We've had a really good time of it economically. We have the infrastructure and the education and the healthcare and all of those things that are fairly accessible for people. In terms of that, like what do you see, and you look back, what do you see as being the greatest innovation so far that you think you've seen in fintech and how it's really impacted people's lives?
In Asia specifically?
No, just in your experience of being in fintech.
Do you know, when I think about, I mean, clearly Singapore doesn't have some of the same challenges that its nearest neighbours have in the region. I mean, I've lived in Singapore now for 15 years. So when I think about fintech innovations, sometimes you actually don't realise that it's having a kind of game-changing impact, really, do you? When it's happening. It's often strange. But if I think back probably 5 years ago, for me personally, in terms of payments, Singapore has this kind of nets payment. So you would put in your bank card and you bang away your kind of PIN number in there, and it was very traditional. And then all of a sudden, QR payments, which when you say QR and you talk to people in the West, they think, oh, that's ancient, that's archaic, right? But obviously QR payments are the norm in Asia. And very quickly through DBS and things like it's called PayLah in Singapore, you could just take your phone out, one click, you're paying for something and you're moving on. And all of a sudden, that friction that existed was just gone, right? It was just gone. And it felt, as a consumer, I'm talking, it felt almost overnight that had happened.
Yeah.
And now, like I mentioned, we've got things like prompt pay and UPI linked to payments where you can pay overseas using Paylar and in places like Thailand in exactly the same way, straight from your Singapore bank account. These are the things I think about. And I think in terms of game changing for Asia, again, it's around kind of financial inclusion, I guess, but foreign domestic workers obviously are a big thing, maids in Asia, and they're often having to go to send money back home, right? So they'll often be working to send money back home to places like the Philippines, and they're being charged, part of that salary, which isn't, huge, I guess, by maybe our standards, a portion of that salary to send money back home to their loved ones. Again, innovation in cross-border payment solutions now allows them to send money back home instantly without fees, right? So again, that is really game-changing. Maybe we wouldn't think about it like that, but that is the way that... And fintech done in the right way makes people's lives better. It lifts people out of poverty. That's what we've got to remember. It's not technology for technology's sake. We are doing something that makes the world a better place. Sometimes that gets lost in the...
Yeah, it does. And I think it also kind of gets lost in, that not everybody kind of has that mindset, right? I always say there's a big difference between changing your world and changing the world.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's kind of and it's good to see that I think the majority of fintechs who have gone on to be successful have changed the world and had some impact on it in a positive light.
And clearly the AI, right? I mean, looking at that now in workflow, I mean, that is such a game changer in terms of, things that used to take an hour, couple of hours of time. With the right workflow now across the different AI tools. Again, this has really just come about in the last year or so, right? A couple of years. You're accelerating things, obviously, fact check and rewrite and, But again, that is a game changer, isn't it? And again, it's a game changer for financial services for the reasons we've talked about. I use Claude quite a lot, which is Anthropic. And that's like having a best friend in your pocket sometimes, right? You're just chatting away. You're asking it questions. I barely use Google search anymore. So again, this has happened so quickly. But again, in the moment, you don't feel it.
Yeah, we talked about this before with the podcast, right? Where
I did.
I'm using, was using like 5-6 different pieces of software now on one platform. I've kind of reduced the time to production from 3 days to 2 hours. I've got all of the stuff around show notes and everything is created. Then if I look at how other ways in which I've brought AI into the business, whereas previously I might have outsourced, offshored, or gone on Fiverr or whatever, and kind of got a contractor to do stuff. I just ask the AI to do it. And if it sends me an answer back and I don't like it and say, hey, that was wrong, I need this, and this, it doesn't take the huff for 8 hours. Right?
No.
Just comes back, right?
You don't even need to say thank you.
Even if I was a bit of a dick in the way in which I asked the question, right?
Someone sent me, I think it was like, a funny kind of GIF type thing. And it was a guy that said, dancing with your number one employee. And the employee had like a robot helmet on and it said, ChatGPT, and they're both dancing around together. But, obviously a bit tongue in cheek, but, if you use it in the right way.
I think it is, right? Like AI agents, so they're already having an impact on my business. And I'm sure they'll have an impact on my clients' businesses as well. Now, one of the kind of themes that we did talk about very briefly was just around health and well-being. I think it is something that's kind of consciously in this last couple of years, certainly, as we all get older, we all seem to be, kind of out of lockdown mode and we're traveling again and we're on flights. And I'm assuming you're doing a hell of a lot of traveling in your job, Danny.
I do,
How do you keep yourself fresh and energized? And have you got any hacks to kind of deal with stress? Any routines that you're kind of just religious about wherever you are in the world?
I mean, the number one thing is I'll book my hotels based on the quality of the hotel gym. So, it needs to have a gym in the hotel. Because I think sometimes you've got jet lag, you can't sleep, so you can go and work off some of that, or, again, keeping you honest in the morning, waking up early, getting a workout in. I always do that when I'm in Singapore, so it's kind of starts the day right. Making sure I get enough sleep on the plane. I know that doesn't sound particularly revolutionary, but, you need to make sure you packed your eye mask and your ear stoppers, and, you're not overindulging on too many movies so you feel fresh. Arriving a day early if it's long-haul travel as well. So not getting off the plane. I have colleagues that do this, by the way. They get off the plane and they go straight into meetings.
Yeah.
Certainly for me, I get in and I need to get my bearings and get a good night's sleep. And I think, just diet and hydration, so if you're eating well and if you're hydrated, and I found actually, funnily enough, recently, if I'm doing the kind of Singapore to US or Singapore to kind of Europe with the time difference, I find that if I don't eat in the mornings, the jet lag is much better. So, not having a really heavy breakfast first thing, I think with the time difference has made a difference for me. So that could be something to try if you're struggling with severe time difference. Don't overindulge on the avocado toast and the boiled eggs. And things first thing. Maybe, don't eat so much, and by lunchtime,
it's just
you can reset yourself.
In Southeast Asia, those breakfast buffets are just like a smorgasbord of curries and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. They are.
It's some good tips there. What my one for long haul travel is no alcohol, and the vegetarian vegan option for the food. And for some reason, that kind of stops any jet lag, dehydration. I think it's because there's not as much salt in the food, and
the altitude
alcohol,
just weird things with your body, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think you maybe don't have quite the boundless energy as you get older, but hopefully you know yourself a little bit better.
Yeah.
Right. So you should know what works for you and what doesn't, and if you're listening to yourself, hopefully do what works for you when you are traveling, because you're going there for a reason, right? For business, and you're expected to perform.
Yeah.
So go there with that mindset that, you want to perform at your top performance, high performance. What do you need to do that?
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's just the podcast that I've just released this week is, with one of Australia's top sports coaches, and the synergies between an elite sports team and a startup, and what is expected of a leader, and how you get high performing teams, and your health is as equally, and diet is as equally important to your energy levels. As everything else.
And when you're running teams, right, you're not yourself, but then everyone's looking at you.
Yeah.
You're setting the tone, you're setting the pace, you're setting the example, and if you're looking after yourself and you're feeling good and you're putting your best foot forward, everyone else is likely to follow that example. So, that's really about high performance. And you've got to be resilient, right? I mean, like we talked about, fintech has had a more kind of difficult ride, I guess, the last couple of years. What's that mindset? How do you get through that? What do you do to, to spring out of bed every morning? That really is about high performance, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That has to be front of mind.
Now, we're coming to a wrap, but before we do, I usually ask people what are their go-to podcasts, but because you've got your own podcast, I thought I'd let you plug that instead. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, and where can people go and listen to it?
Yeah, I mean, I do listen to other ones as well, but so I started my podcast back in the pandemic in 2020, like a lot of people, right? Shut up at home. And I was working for a different company at the time, and we had kind of more events in different sectors. So we had capital markets, but we had kind of e-commerce for retail. We had procurement for chief procurement officers. But at that time, if you remember, in 2020, digital transformation was the big thing. So that was cutting across all these different industries. And again, similar to Money2020, it was the leaders, it was the kind of premium style events. So my podcast, Digital Transformation and Leadership, as a way to, bring that umbrella into one place. And really, probably like yourself, in the first few episodes, I was kind of finding my feet and figuring out how to do it. But it's gone from strength to strength, and we've had some, big name guests on there, big companies that you would know across the kind of technology space, Meta, Google, IBM, DBS. And we talk about, it's very varied, right? Digital transformation, a bit like fintech, is a big topic. So we've talked about things, from AI to high performance, to kind of leadership issues, how how to really think about time management. So it's very varied,
Yeah.
but it's done really well. It ranks now, well, according to the internet, it ranks, I think, in the top kind of 15 to 10 top global digital transformation podcasts
Awesome.
in the world. So yeah, be great if people would go and check that out. And then the other ones I listen to very quickly, I actually do listen to the High Performance podcast. I do like that one.
Yeah.
Which is sports people, as you've spoken about, because I just think there's so much kind of lessons within high performing, Olympiads or football players that you can take into business. And I find that very useful to kind of get a different lens on things. And lastly, it's big, but he does a good job, is the Diary of a CEO. I do like the way he shines a spotlight on his guests. He's very good at not just asking a question, but really asking follow-up questions to kind of get to the core of the issue. And again, very varied, and he's had some amazing people on there. So he does a good job.
Awesome. Now, the big event, April 2025, Bangkok. Where can people find out more? Where can they get tickets if they're interested in, I guess, being a customer as well? Where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so I mean, if you just plug in Money2020 Asia to Google, that'll probably do the trick.
Or ChatGPT.
It'll come up top. But like I said, the Asia market, it's not short of fintech events, but I think the model of Money2020, when we looked at it, the problem that we saw was that there was no event that brought together the most senior professionals. And as I say, it's a paid for event. So when you're in the walls of Money2020, you rubbing shoulders really with the who's who of the industry.
Yeah, look, and I mentioned my hiatus for 12 months. It was also because when I was going there, the people I needed to speak to weren't there. They were too busy getting shit done and making things happen. And if you're going to make time for an event, when you're a key decision maker, you have to be getting a return from investment.
Exactly. And our focus is really on quality over quantity. So you might go to a show which is 70,000 people, but I would imagine it's pretty hard to get to the right people when the show is of that size. So for us, 4,000 people in Bangkok in April, 1 in 3 are C-suite, 50% are at the decision-making level. So I would say if you're serious about having a good time, wellness as well, as we've talked about, but also taking in some amazing and incredible content, hearing from regional regulators. We've got 10 regional regulators already confirmed. So you get all the policy updates, and it's just an amazing few days.
Yeah.
It's really worth coming to check it out. And part of the reason I moved over to Money2020 was that magic that I talked about. It's just not common in the industry to have such a blend of content, networking, and amazing experiences.
Where are the best places and social networks for people to follow you, Danny?
So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, as you know. We did all this through LinkedIn. So if you just plug in Danny Levy to LinkedIn, I'll pop up. I'm on X as well, and I'm off the other social platforms, so I can just concentrate a little bit more. And no shorts these days. God, that's such a time suck. But if you want, if you want to connect with me, LinkedIn's the best place, and I'm pretty good on there. So I'll come back to you.
Awesome. Well, Danny, good luck with the event in April. Thanks so much for joining me and sharing the insights from the report as well.
There you go. And hopefully some of those come true, Dexter, for you in 2025.
Thank you very much. Well, folks, thanks for joining us. If you're new to the show, make sure you follow us wherever you listen to podcasts or subscribe on Fintech Chatter TV on YouTube. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. It really does help me get great guests like Danny onto the show, and it also makes me feel really good. Until the next episode, keep well.